If Fred had been a successful actor, he would have realized he was washed up at this point. Instead, he had gone through life more like a person stranded at sea. He had never found his claim to fame by debuting in a feature film, or appearing in an advert for acne-afflicted teens. The only time Fred had grabbed the headline in the local newspaper was 25 years ago, when he played Santa in the Christmas pantomime. The New Stone Theatre had a capacity of 800 people, and it was a full house, which hadn't been anticipated. Despite Fred's intolerable phobia of crowds, he attempted to crack the theatre industry. He thought this would help him conquer his fears, prove his determination, and make him an overnight success. The local press would praise him on his charismatic portrayal of St. Nicholas, and the jobs would come rolling in like boulders in a landslide. That was not to happen. Fred was wise enough not to get drunk before the show. Instead, he used his breathing exercises and gulped down a calming herbal tablet, hoping for a placebo effect to satiate his nerves. Stepping onto the stage like a cautious deer checking for hunters, Fred's lines instantaneously took flight. On top of that, unbeknownst to him, his foot became entangled by recklessly abandoned Christmas lights. As Fred slipped and fell off the side of the stage, the lights yanked his leg and left him dangling upside down, head millimeters from the sticky floor. Laughter echoed through the room into his subconscious, waking him with a jolt to this very day. Now, in the present, Fred gave a reluctant sigh as he pulled on his Santa suit, once again having to take the role of the guy who ruined his promising acting career. That's what he blamed it on anyway. He was a living satire. The years had made him resentful and weighed him down, along with all of the food he consumed. And although he was bitter, at times he was pleasant, even if it was a facade. He hobbled along the quiet back roads towards the shopping centre, favouring to avoid the hustle and bustle of the main street. A man on the opposite side of the road limped to an unrushed tempo and produced a guttural, gurgling noise. Most people in this town kept to themselves, so Fred ignored this. It was his way of being polite. Fred grumbled something unintelligible under his breath as he stepped into a large puddle, which quickly filled his shabby boots with rainwater. Lacking a change of socks, he'd have to tolerate a wet foot all day. How the tables had turned. Now he was the one limping and making odd sounds. Down the dingy alley round the side of the building, this was where he would make his grand entrance. Slumped in a sleeping bag a couple of feet away, a homeless man observed him. "Got a light?" His voice was reminiscent of a rusty harmonica. This had been their daily routine, as Fred never offered it outright. "Here, take this." Fred held out a disposable lighter. This was his final day on the job, so he thought of it as a parting gift. They hadn't exchanged many words, but Fred and the homeless man would watch the world go by together on his precious cigarette breaks. The problem with festive season gigs was they were temporary, but it was all he could find for now, and once he was paid today, he'd have just enough for this month's rent. "Thanks, man." The homeless man nodded, and Fred pushed down on the bar to open the door. His shoes left dirt tracks behind as he made his way into the narrow hallway, trying his best to do so quietly, especially as his left foot squished with each step. As he passed the open doorway on his left, Roy noticed him. Not what he had wanted. "What are you doing? There are parents and children queuing out there. We're losing customers. I asked you to be here 10 minutes early, not 5. How fucking difficult is it to get your fat ass out of bed and here for 12 p.m., really?" It was 11:55 a.m., so that sentence made no sense. Fred accepted Roy was just being a complete dickhead as usual. "Sorry," was all Fred could bring himself to say for now. But there was plenty more he planned to say at the end of the day, when that last paycheck was in his hands. He'd rehearsed his lines and practiced in front of the mirror. It was going to be the most magnificent performance he had ever given. Fred peeped through the red velvet curtains. 2 adults and 3 children in the queue. Hardly busy. Santa's little helper was sacked 3 days in, so Fred had to open the curtains. He steadied himself into his chair, surrounded by polystyrene snow, plastic penguins, a barrel of presents, and a Christmas tree covered in tinsel. On his first day at the job, he had stripped the tree of its lights, taken them out the side entrance, and chucked them into a large bin. Then feigned ignorance, denying any knowledge of where they had gone. He had to ensure there were no more incidents. This was, after all, his grotto. "Oh ho ho! What would you like for Christmas, little boy?" He could hardly fluff the lines. Ask the question, listen to their answers, and give them a piece of cheap tat wrapped up in a misleadingly large cardboard box. Maybe if he got there early next year, he could be the one running his own Santa's grotto, and boss some other poor shit around. Time for a 10-minute smoke break. Fred stood near the end of the wide alley, away from the clearing at the front of the shopping centre. No one is allowed to see Santa smoking. That was Roy's #1 rule. The rubbish bin, a few feet away to Fred's right, made a rustling sound. The bin he had thrown the Christmas lights in. He stepped closer for a better listen. There was a faint, scratching noise. He had a fleeting thought that maybe the lights were trying to get him. Suddenly, something latched onto Fred from behind and was pulling at him. "Ah!" Fred retorted, and flipped the attacker over onto their back. It was the homeless man, but somehow, if possible, he looked more disheveled. "What do you want from me? I haven't got any more fucking lighters. You had my last one." Fred grabbed the cigarette packet from his inside pocket. "Is this what you want? Take 'em." Now, with a better view, Fred could see the dangling rotten leg meat and bared fibula of the homeless man, who proceeded to drag himself up, lurch forward, and bite the cigarette packet Fred held. "What the fuck? If you've been eating cigarettes this whole time, you've been doing it wrong." Fred backed up and fell against the fire exit bar, then managed to slam the door shut behind him, with the Walking Dead tramp still outside. He raised his hand, which was now shaking and covered in blood. It felt like little creatures were wriggling around inside the flesh wound. He grabbed a bandage from the first aid box, wrapped it up, and sat back down in his grotto. Fred had seen enough horror movies to guess that the vagrant beggar had been zombified, and had also most likely infected him. But he would wait it out. Just 1 more hour for his paycheck. Just 1 more hour until he could tell Roy what he really thought of him. The show must go on. "And what would you like, little girl?" Every minute enhanced the gruffness of Fred's voice. 53 minutes to go. He had no clue when or if he might expire. All he knew was he had definitely passed his best before date. Fred fought the urge to unleash madness. 3 wish lists listened to. 38 minutes to go. Act natural. He persuaded himself it wasn't so difficult. Deep breath. Act natural. Fred grit his teeth as his breathing became shallow and rough. He struggled to focus, like the feeling when you're just starting to dream. Spit frothed from his mouth, coalesced, and dangled in thick strands as he released a loud gurgle. Next child. Parents moved their crying offspring away, surrendering their places in the queue. Something was terribly wrong with Santa. The ruckus was overheard by Roy, who ran over as he watched his customers retreat. "What the hell do you think you're doing, scaring the kids away?" Roy turned to face his employee for an explanation, but Fred had given up the struggle. The sight of Roy had convinced him to relinquish the last of his humanity. Veins were protruding from his pasty face, and his eyes had glazed over. Fred? Fred pounced.